It's, I mean, obviously, we don't know how many people were on each car, but if you, and we're not exactly sure how many cars were on this train, but typically, you know, the passenger we spoke to said he thought there were about 10. Typically, it can be 12 or 13. So it would sound like each car was not particularly highly populated, and hopefully there were not too many people in those front cars, as we've shown you. There you see one car upside down on Interstate 5, having fallen off the overpass. There is the second car, which has landed essentially in the bottom of that car, and then subsequently all the cars behind it, with the exception of the very last, which is the locomotive, also derailed, according to that passenger we spoke with.
Cairo says 70. The State Department of Transportation says 75. And as you point out, the train can carry 250, and it squares with what Chris Carnes, the witness, told us, that there were very few people on his car. But again, this train, this was the beginning launch, and it was very early in the train route. So I guess if there is good news here, it's that the train was not fully loaded. Yes, Chris?
A little bit of information from the Pierce County Sheriff, who we understand are so far sort of leading the police response here. They're reporting that several cars on I-5 were struck by the derailed Amtrak train cars. Multiple motorists injured on the roadway. They say no fatalities reported amongst the motorists yet. But so there's another element here. It was rush hour time in Seattle when this happened. So as those cars came flying off the tracks, they came down and impacted cars on Interstate 5. I-5 is a very busy freeway through Seattle. In fact, far more people in the Seattle area are going to be driving than they are going to be riding Amtrak. So the Pierce County Sheriff is now reporting that several cars on the interstate were struck as the train cars came off the tracks. So many of your injuries are going to come from people in those vehicles, in addition to the 70 to 75 people on board the Amtrak train. And that difference in numbers, that's not unusual. It took Amtrak about a day or so to get a firm count of how many people were on train 188, because, you know, it's a porous system. People get on, people get off, so you know how many tickets have been sold. But if somebody decided to get off at a stop earlier or had missed their stop, your numbers can change. So that 70 to 75 could fluctuate a bit. Plus, you're going to have train crew. You're also going to have the engineer and conductors, so that could be the difference as well.
And Chris, again, to Chris's point about far more people traveling on this highway, where we now know that a number of cars were struck by the train when it came off the track. The southbound, the Washington State Department of Transportation is saying will be closed for an extended period of time while this accident is being investigated.
And it is top of the hour, noon Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Many people waking up at this hour and seeing that there has been a major train derailment in Washington State. What we know is, according to the local sheriff's office, there are confirmed fatalities. There were about 70 people on board this Amtrak Cascades train. It derailed around 7:30 a.m. Pacific Time in the early hours of the morning commute. This was a new route for Amtrak. They had just put it into motion, a new route that was supposed to be a little quicker for people traveling on this train. So there were some new signals, some new things on the tracks in place. And what we've seen from Google Map is that this was a curve that went right over Interstate 5, a curve in the tracks, a normal curve. But we also, according to Amtrak, this train was going about 80 miles an hour. So one of, I think, the top questions for many people is speed, the bend in this curve, as NTSB is already making its way to the scene to figure out what went wrong. But I think it's also fair to say that right now people are focused on recovery, because there were 70 people on board that train. And the pictures that we've seen so far, not only the train that's upside down that's on Interstate 5, but also the other ones that are hanging over. And then, of course, the cars and vehicles that officials now confirm were also struck that were on Interstate 5 as a result of this collision.
You can see that one car there upside down. Looks like it may have burned. Another car landed on top of it, and all the way back, as far back as that train went, the number of cars we have not been able to nail down, but it's probably somewhere in the order of 10 to 12. They all went off the track. Some went down the embankment. and at least one witness has told us that he witnessed multiple injuries. We have heard there are fatalities, and as Nora mentioned, vehicles on the road on the southbound side were struck by this train as it landed on I-5.
That's the last thing you expect when you're driving. I keep thinking about those people, guys, on the highway going to school, going to work, wherever they were going. Yeah. You're driving down the highway. The last thing you expect is a train to come flying in the air, toppling on front of your car. As you said, Nora, they will be focusing on recovery right now, but one of the things they will look at is the engineer and the conductor. The engineer, what was the condition of, they said they will look at toxicology reports, they will look at cell phone records, and they will look at his familiarity and training on driving this particular route. So a lot of questions need to be answered before they can come up with any kind of conclusion.
The NTSB on its way to the scene, and we want to bring back in former NTSB Chairman Mark Rosenker, who I think is still with us. Mark, there's a camera on this train, is there not?
That's correct, Anthony. There's actually two now as a result of the Pennsylvania crash that was coming around the corner much too fast, 188. Amtrak decided to not only have cameras that had already been placed on the dashboard, but they've got them now inside so you can actually see what the engineer was doing, which would in fact tell us if he was distracted in any way, had a medical emergency. But they will do a meticulous job of, one, doing the interviews with not only the crew members, but as many passengers as possible. This video, interestingly enough, may show any type of track anomaly as the train was coming over, and it will also, through the actual recorder, the event recorder on board the locomotive, show if, in fact, the engineer attempted to do any type of braking. An emergency braking would be absolutely amazing in that, and it may well have been a contributing factor to the accident if, in fact, were problems with the track.
Why would the braking have been a contributing factor?
Because it could have been moving so fast, and you could actually get a kind of a push-pull effect as the cars begin to come on top of each other.
Yeah, we just want to point out to people who are looking at this now, it's difficult to tell, but it appears there may be people inside the train. Actually, it might have been a reflection of people down on the highway there. You can see the massive response of first responders. The door on the car that's dangling looks open, so hopefully people were able to get out of that car. We do know that the one passenger we spoke to said he had to kick out the emergency window to get out of the car on the embankment, which would have been behind the image you're looking at now. This is a live picture of the scene in Dupont, Washington. Again, this was a train. This was Amtrak train 501, its Cascade service, which travels from Seattle to Portland. It had come out of Tacoma, a brand new station in Tacoma, which literally opened for passengers today. They had the dedication on Friday. It was about 45 minutes out of Tacoma. It was rounding a curve just on the one side of this overpass you're seeing now when it suddenly went off the tracks. And as you can see, at least one car landed on southbound Interstate 5 upside down. Another car right behind it was stopped by the car in front of it. It is still dangling there. And every subsequent car behind it is off the tracks with the exception of the locomotive at the very back of the train, which is the only thing that still stayed on the tracks according to the passenger we spoke with earlier.
Chris Van Cleve is on the phone and has additional information. Chris?
Yeah, so it looks like these tracks belong to a freight rail train. That's one of the reasons why Gail asked about positive train control earlier. Amtrak doesn't own these tracks, so these tracks would be maintained by a freight railroad, and Mark can talk a little bit about why that situation, the sharing. But what you're also starting to see, you're going to see multicolored tents along the scene there. That's part of the triage effort. That's what really right now the focus is going to be on, is making sure everybody is off that train and getting people medical care. So there's going to be an area where there's probably like a red tarp or a red tent. That's going to be your critical injuries. You're then going to have a yellow one, and those are more in your walking wounded, but that could be broken bones, other sorts of somewhat serious injuries. And then you're going to have a green area where people who are not terribly hurt or not hurt at all are going to be checked out. So right now, the focus is going to be search, rescue, and transporting the injured. Once they've gotten everyone accounted for and treated, then you really sort of move into your investigation mode and can start trying to figure out what went wrong. But right now, it's trying to get a handle of how many people were on that train. Was it 70? Was it 75? Because that becomes really important when you're trying to account for everybody. Mm-hmm. How many vehicles were involved, and can you get to everyone, and can you get them help? And that's where they are now.
And Chris, we are seeing right now a lot of what you're talking about, the green, yellow, and the red tents. We can see a lot of passengers who are walking around with blankets. They appear to be moving on their own, so that certainly is a good sign. And this train, as we know, we've been told, can carry up to 200